Hello again, stats students. I just wanted to make another video that might help you with the next set of slides for your project. So in the next set, you're going to be comparing two categorical variables like we did in class. So I'm going to use the police killings data again as an example. And something I'm interested in is whether or not the race is associated with, let's go over to it, whether the person was armed or not. So those are the two categorical variables that I want to compare. So I'm going to copy the data into a new sheet. So I've got the race data and I've got the, whether they're armed or not data. And the next thing I want to do is I want to set up a table just like we did in class that's going to look at race along one axis and whether they were armed or not and what they were armed with along the other. So probably the fastest way for me to do that is to put on a filter. And if I click here, I can see what the different races are. So I'm actually, here, I'm back. I'm going to write these down and then make the table here. So I've got blank, Asian Pacific, Black, Hispanic, Native American, unknown, white. So now I'm going to start making a table over here with all of those. So I've got white, black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, unknown, and I've got blank category. Now, so I've got my races going down this way. Now I'm going to look at whether or not they were armed, so I can do the same thing. Create a new filter view and view the different types of armed. And I'm going to write those down first. So I've got blank, disputed, firearm, knife, none, non-lethal, other, and unknown. So here I am. I'm just going to copy those across now using my notes. But I'm going to put them in an order that I like. So disputed, firearm, knife, non-lethal firearm, none, other, unknown, and blank. So now I want to count how many white had a disputed weapon, how many white had a firearm, how many white had a knife. So the way that I'm going to do that is by using my filters. Let me get rid of my face here. So let's first go to our filter view and we'll clear everybody except the whites. So now I can see all of these and I want to count how many are in each category. So one way that I can do that is I can just highlight all the firearms. Oop, I went too far. So highlight the firearms and then look down here, there were 120. So I can't type that into my table right now, so I'm going to again write it on my notes. So white firearm is 120. I want to actually try something with you right now. Let's see if we can put both filters at the same time, because that would make it a lot easier to see. Okay, great. So now I'm looking only at whites with firearms, so I can actually see pretty clearly. Why is it showing 230 now? Oh, okay, I see. These numbers skip, so you can't rely on the numbers. So you still have to highlight it, but it's 120. So now let's turn off firearm and we'll look at whites with a knife. And if I highlight them now, I'm getting 32. Go down the line. whites with none, highlight. I'm counting 51. With non-lethal, counting 8. Other, counting 15. Unknown, counting 5. And we've got one more to check, and that's the blank category, but there are no blanks, so I think we're good. So now if I turn off these filters, I can fill these values into my chart. So, oh, I guess we didn't have any dispute. Oh, we did have 2 disputed here. Okay. No, those were for Hispanic and Latino. Let's double check that. I think I missed the disputed category. Go back to white. Put our filter again. Oops. Let's just see. Now, just for the sake, let's just sort it to see if there's any disputed. Okay, no disputed. Great. Okay, I got interrupted, so hopefully I can get back on track from where I was before. We were looking at all the different types of, well, let me turn off this filter now. So we have our different our different weapons, and we had just counted how many whites had each type of weapon. So I counted that the whites with a firearm was 120. Whites with a knife was, I think I wrote 32, but I'm not sure. Whites with none, that was 51. Whites with a non-lethal weapon, I counted 8. With other, 15. With unknown, 5. And we just determined that there were no blanks and no disputed. So now I would have to go back in and do this for each of the different races. So I'm not going to make you watch me do that, but I'm going to go do it and then come fill in the blanks in just a minute. Okay, and we're back. And you'll notice that I didn't actually find any in the blank category, so I'm going to just delete that. So now I've filled in everything. So let's just take a second to look at what this is saying. So for example, 31 Hispanics had a firearm, or 2 Asians had a knife. 2 Asians that were killed had a knife. So now I want to make my graph. So I can grab all of this and click on Insert Graph. And the first one that it comes up with is this multi-bar graph. So it basically shows for each weapon type how many of each race were killed while holding that weapon type. So I don't love this graph because it basically emphasizes the categories that had just a lot of people in them. So white is always the biggest bar, but that's pretty much just because there were the most number of white people. So the types of graphs that I prefer are the ones that look at the percentages. So if you scroll down, that's going to be one where we have all of the bars having the same height and then they're segmented. So now this gives us a little more information. It says if we look at people with a disputed weapon, half of them were black and half of them were Hispanic, but there was only 1 black person and 1 Hispanic person that were in that category. So again, this doesn't really tell us that much about how the races differ. So what I might want to do is look at this graph but with the races here and then the weapon types as the different segments. So the way that I do that, my head is blocking it, okay, is I come down to where it says switch rows and columns, and I actually want to turn it this way. So turn that off. And now what we're seeing is If we look at white people, the majority of them had a firearm. But that looks to be pretty, like in most different races, about 50% had firearms. Except for the Asians. In the Asian category, the most popular weapon was actually none. So to me, that's a pretty interesting result. And this also tells you some percentage values. So let's think about how to interpret that. If we look, for example, here, for blacks, this is saying that 52.4% of blacks had a firearm. 14.3% of blacks had a knife. I can't even. 0.8% of blacks were carrying a non-lethal firearm, and 25.4% were carrying no weapon, and 5.6% had some other type of weapon. And you could similarly look at that breakdown for whites. And so what you'd want to do with this now is make a comparison and see if the race had anything to do with being able to predict what type of weapon they had. And that's something that you should think about with respect to your own data, and we can talk about together in class. So I hope that this helps you make some cool graphs, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with in your projects.